Hey writers, Ingrid here, and this is Ingrid's Notes, where I'm talking about creative writing, craft, and process. And today I want to talk about when you are stuck in the middle of your novel, you've played out the premise, and you find yourself floating suddenly in the middle of Act 2, and you don't know what to do. So the reason we feel like we're floating in this huge, long Act 2 is because we spend so much time focused on the plot point turn at the end of Act 1 that moves us into Act 2, and then the other plot turn at the end of Act 2 that moves us into Act 3. So we're here at the beginning and the end of the story, and we haven't spent as much time looking at the center of the story. The way in which to deal with this giant sea of Act 2 is what I call the screenwriter's best kept secret. And that's the midpoint, right smack in the middle of Act 2, which almost could act as its own act break, because it needs to have a giant energy change. It needs to up the stakes in a huge way that's going to propel the story from the center all the way to the end of Act 2. Let me give you some examples from some feature films. The midpoint in Jurassic Park, you probably know if you think about it. It's actually the moment when the power goes off and all of the dinosaurs escape from their cages. And yes, the energy and the stakes get really high because now it's life and death, and the dinosaurs are going to eat our characters. Another example that's similar to Jurassic Park is The Hunger Games. The actual midpoint of The Hunger Games is the point when the games themselves start. It might seem like they start earlier in the story, but we actually use a lot of time to develop character and the world and the stakes and what the capital is like. And that major energy turning point that becomes the real point of no return is when the games start. In Back to the Future, Marty McFly is, of course, trying to get back to the future. But the midpoint is the point in which his father doesn't end up asking his mother to the dance, which then has negative repercussions, because if he completes his goal of getting back to the future at this point, he's no longer going to exist because his parents aren't going to get together. So again, the stakes have heightened. He has to actually get his parents back together, which creates that energy for the second act, or second half of the second act, before he can actually go home. In the movie Toy Story, the midpoint is when Buzz Lightyear comes across the television and sees a commercial about Buzz Lightyear toys and discovers that he is actually a toy and has basically an existential crisis about who he is and his identity, and becomes a huge obstacle now for Woody through the whole second half of Act 2. In the movie Room and the book Room, the midpoint is more of a world change. The midpoint is when they actually get out of the room and now have to go into the real world and deal with the obstacles of the real world. So the midpoint is really the true point of no return in your story. Often we talk about the Act 1 turning point as the point of no return, where you start the quest, but your midpoint is really the emotional, high stakes point of no return. Your character cannot go back from this place. So if you think about it as its own act break in the middle of Act 2, now you have a strong energy punch that's going to move you through this big, open, wide, crazy sea that you feel like you're drowning in. So when I'm advising my critique clients on their manuscripts about their midpoint, often two different scenarios tend to show up. One is they have some sort of major set piece, like in The Hunger Games and Jurassic Park, and they've put it too early in the story, and they really need to move it back to be the midpoint. The other one is they have something they're saving for Act 3 that they think is the climax of the book, but really if they take that and they move it to the midpoint, now they have all of this beautiful energy and excitement and way in which that is going to play out for the second half of the novel. And that really is the entire second half of the book, not actually a small piece at the very end. So whatever it is that you're writing, think about if it's one of those two options, or just try to think through what is a major energy change that would completely shift add new stakes and liven up the second half of Act 1. So you don't have to float around in this. You can charge forward. Woo! Once again, this is Ingrid's Notes, and if you've been enjoying these videos, please subscribe. In the meantime, go out, play in the water, have fun in the middle of the sea of Act 2, figure out your plot point, and rock it. Woo! My midpoint's out here somewhere.